Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I am absolutely thrilled to welcome you to the 12th explainer in our comprehensive research methodology series titled Characteristics of the Best Research Problem. Today, we're tackling something that is just incredibly foundational. We are literally going to build the ultimate blueprint for crafting a high-quality research problem. Whether you're a novice scholar drafting your very first proposal, or you're a seasoned researcher looking to kind of sharpen your focus, mastering this specific skill is exactly what separates a pretty good study from a truly groundbreaking one. So let's jump right in. Okay, let's dive into this with a really powerful thought from Fred N. Kurlinger. He says, "The formulation of a problem is often more essential than its solution, for the problem frames the research path." I want you to just think about that for a second. Your research problem acts as the intellectual anchor directing your entire scholarly project. If your anchor is weak, well, your research just drifts. The quality of this problem determines the relevance, the clarity, and ultimately the success of every single investigation you undertake. If you get this part wrong, everything else that follows is going to be compromised. So, over the next 10 minutes or so, we are going to build that perfect research problem step by step. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the intellectual anchor. Second, remaining clear, focused, and specific. Third, feasible and ethical execution. Fourth, novelty and real-world value. And finally, overcoming formulation challenges. Let's start with Section 1, the intellectual anchor. To really wrap our heads around the research problem, we kind of have to remind ourselves of the fundamental purpose of research itself. At its core, research is a systematic quest for knowledge. But you can't start a quest without a starting point, right? We define the research problem as the intellectual anchor of any scholarly project that directs a researcher's attention to a specific issue or gap in knowledge. Without this anchor, you are seriously risking wasting incredible amounts of time and energy on vague or unfeasible studies. A poorly defined problem basically yields no meaningful findings, primarily because you aren't exactly sure what you're looking for in the first place. This anchor is the very thing that keeps your methodology tight, your objectives perfectly aligned, and your final conclusions actually relevant to the real world. Moving on to Section 2, clear, focused, and specific. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we mean when we get to the design phase. John Creswell, who is a total leading expert in research design, points out that anyone, specialist or non-specialist, should be able to grasp a problem's essence without getting completely lost in academic jargon. Let's do our first makeover here. Imagine starting with a super vague idea like issues in education. If you start there, where do you even begin? It is just overwhelmingly broad. But look at the alternative. Factors contributing to low reading comprehension among middle school students in urban public schools. Wow, right? Replacing a broad, cloudy idea with a highly specific one completely eliminates ambiguity. It tells the reader exactly who, what, and where you are studying, which means you can accurately measure your variables from day one. But hey, there's a trap here, and Keith F. Punch warns us about it. He states, "The most effective research problems are sharply focused but flexible enough to allow for meaningful explanation." I actually love to call this the Goldilocks rule of problem formulation. You need that perfect balance. Your problem can't be so broad that it's unmanageable, but it also can't be so overly narrow that it restricts you from actually exploring the data and finding meaningful patterns. You have to give yourself enough breathing room to let the data surprise you. To see what failure looks like in this regard, let's look at the extremes. On one hand, you have an excessively broad problem, like factors affecting education worldwide. Honestly, you could spend 3 lifetimes, actually scratch that, 10 lifetimes, and billions of dollars studying this, and you would never finish. It completely locks focus. On the flip side, you have an overly narrow problem, the effect of blue ink on memory retention in one classroom. Okay, sure, it's incredibly easy to execute, but it totally lacks generalizability. The findings wouldn't apply to anyone else outside of that single room, rendering the whole study almost useless to the wider academic community. So, what does the perfect after makeover look like? Here you go. The effect of note-taking strategies on memory retention among university freshmen. This is the sweet spot, guys. This level of specificity ensures the research is entirely manageable for a single researcher or a small team, but it is still incredibly meaningful. Universities around the world could take these exact findings and apply them to help their students learn better. It perfectly balances focus with widespread utility. That brings us to Section 3, feasible and ethical execution. Your research problem might sound like a Nobel Prize-winning idea on paper, but listen, if it's entirely impossible to execute within realistic constraints, it is fundamentally a bad research problem. Execution is absolutely everything. C.R. Kothari breaks down the 4 pillars or constraints of feasibility. Check these out: access to data, availability of resources, ethical considerations, and the researcher's competence. The crucial takeaway here is that your research must be practically executable, not just aspirational. Do you have the funding? Can you actually secure the interviews or get your hands on the data sets? Do you personally have the advanced statistical skills required to analyze the results? If the answer is no to any of these, you have to pivot and reevaluate your core problem immediately. I want you to mentally test your own ideas right now as we look at this next makeover. Imagine proposing a study on the exact psychological impact of climate change on every human being. No way, right? That is an impossible, unmanageable global study. You simply don't have the data access, the multinational resources, or frankly, the lifespan to pull that off. But look at the alternative: psychological effects of climate disasters on coastal adolescents. See what we did there? We just took an unfeasible global aspiration and narrowed it down to a highly targeted, executable project that still carries massive societal importance. You can actually find those adolescents, conduct those surveys, and synthesize that data. And nestled right alongside logistics is the absolute necessity of ethical execution. According to Newman, ethical considerations include respect for participants, avoidance of harm, and adherence to legal standards. Let me be clear, this isn't just bureaucratic red tape. It is non-negotiable. For example, proposing a study that involves some sort of invasive medical procedure without transparent informed consent is entirely unethical, no matter how innovative or significant the eventual findings might be to science. A good research problem naturally lends itself to a methodology that protects its participants.
All right, section 4, novelty and real-world value.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it highlights value. Once you know your problem is specific and feasible, you have to ask yourself the tough questions. Does your research actually fill a gap in our current understanding, or are you just repeating what we already know? Injecting novelty into a well-worn topic is actually simpler than you'd think. Think about a study repeating the known effects of a standard treadmill routine on cardiovascular health. We have decades of data confirming that running is good for your heart. Doing this study again adds very little value to human knowledge. But instead, what if we examine the impact of virtual reality-based exercise programs on cardiovascular health? Applying a modern technological variation to an established issue brings instant novelty and completely prevents academic redundancy. Beyond novelty, there is true significance. Look at the stark contrast here. Studying the effect of coffee on graduate student productivity might be kind of fun, and sure, it might even get a few chuckles at a conference, but it's arguably pretty trivial in the grand scheme of things. Contrast that with the impact of sleep deprivation on medical student academic performance. That latter study has major, immediate, real-world significance. It directly impacts hospital administration, medical training programs, and ultimately patient safety and human lives. The very best research problems matter deeply to society. But remember, pursuing novelty doesn't mean you just get to ignore the past. And this brings us to theoretical grounding. This means building upon existing literature to situate your problem within ongoing scholarly conversations. Let's say your cool novel idea is studying digital learning tools and student motivation. Well, you can't just invent your own framework out of thin air. You must logically anchor your research to existing, established motivational theories in education. It gives your new, novel idea the academic credibility it needs to be taken seriously by your peers. When you successfully combine novelty, significance, and theoretical grounding, you unlock what Kerlinger calls the potential for contribution. High-quality problems generally do 3 things simultaneously. They resolve real-world issues, they advance academic theory, and, quite practically for your career, let's be honest, they attract funding and scholarly recognition. For instance, studying the social impact of renewable energy adoption advances sociology and economics theories while actively contributing highly practical solutions to the global climate crisis. It hits every single mark perfectly.
And finally, section 5, overcoming formulation challenges.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Because even when you fully understand clarity, feasibility, and novelty, formulating the perfect problem is incredibly tough. Novice researchers often struggle with overambition, bending to external time constraints, or just getting lost in vague ideas. To combat this, Creswell suggests a highly actionable 3-step blueprint called iterative refinement. Step 1, begin with your broad interests. Don't worry about being perfect or narrow right out of the gate. Step 2, narrow that broad interest relentlessly through a deep, comprehensive literature review to find the actual gaps in knowledge. And Step 3, clarify and test your precise problem through small, manageable pilot studies before you commit a whole year of your life to the massive project. It's essentially a vital process of carving away the excess until only the core question remains. Ultimately, research formulation is a delicate balancing act. You are constantly weighing the core factor against your specific goal and the inherent challenge that comes with it. You want intense significance, but you absolutely must avoid triviality. You want feasibility, but you have to strictly curb your overambition. You need total novelty without just repeating old studies, and you must maintain strict ethical protections for your participants while simultaneously pushing for boundary-breaking innovation. You literally have to juggle all of these traits without ever sacrificing the crystal clarity of your core question. It takes practice for sure, but it is entirely achievable. So, to summarize our core thesis today, a well-chosen research problem is the intellectual spark that transforms raw human curiosity into structured, tremendously valuable inquiry. It requires a careful balance of creativity to find that hidden gap in the literature, alongside the strict discipline to ensure academic rigor. Mastering this process ensures that your study won't just sit unread on a dusty library shelf somewhere. It guarantees your work will add genuine, measurable value to society and push your academic field forward. So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative question. What intellectual spark will ignite your next research journey? Take the rigorous blueprint we discussed today and apply it critically to your current ideas. If you found this explainer helpful in sharpening your research skills and defining your scholarly path, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an update in our research methodology series. Thank you so much for joining me, and happy researching.